Today, Ryan continues his conversation with Mike, a former STATMed class participant. This is part 2 of a conversation in which Mike shares his crisis point, or the moment in med school when he first realized he was seriously struggling and needed to take action.
Yeah, it's the line in the sand. You have 8 hours. Whatever number that computer spits out is whether your future is done and you're not a doctor, or you can continue on and graduate. Like, that's the line. That is the line you have to cross to be able to graduate.
So what did you do?
Called you. Panicked.
I'm Ryan Orwig with StatMed Learning, where we talk about learning and test taking in med school and on medical boards. Welcome back to our conversation with my former student and my friend, Dr. Mike, who's been sharing with us his crisis points on his journey to becoming an emergency medicine doctor. If you haven't listened to part 1, go back and do that one first. It's a doozy. So Mike, a quick refresher. Tell us who you are.
So just a quick recap. I'm a ER physician in Florida. I'm the assistant director of a mid-sized ER here in Florida. Here with my wife and kids, and we have a happy family, happy life here. Ryan and I have had our intertwined life for approximately the past 10 years. And talking, we've talked and touched base multiple times, and you just kind of think about how different your life could have been if any of these crisis points had gone differently, and how different it was because of the crisis points in the first place. So.
Absolutely. So let's pick up on your story, where we sort of talked about how you fought your way through med school and dismissal and some mini crises along the way, squeezed by your level 1 board exam, did well getting through, your rotations, and then hit your second crisis point, which is what we're going to talk about right now, when you failed COMLEX level 2 by a handful of points. So that's kind of where we are right now. What can you tell me about the buildup to that test and, of course, the fallout from not passing that test?
It's a very similar story to a lot of people that don't pass. At that point, I knew I'd just barely passed step 1. So I was on rotations, doing well on rotations through the year. I decided I was going to do ER and was applying to residencies and had auditions set up to travel all over the country to go to different ER residencies. And this is an important test and you've got to do well. And so for the months leading up to it, I would go into the hospital early. I would study before rotations. I would study at lunch. I would carry flashcards in my pocket just to squeeze every little bit of studying time in. After rotations, I would go back. I would study more until 9, 10 o'clock at night. I basically lived at the hospital. We were there all the time. I studied more than I did for step 1 because I knew this was the one this is the level 2 that everybody looks at. And this is what determines which residency you get, where you go. And so that was my mindset going in, was I'm going to use the study skills that I learned, when I repeated first year, combine that, with working harder than I'd ever done before. And so went in confident to that board's practice test. I think I did about 5,000 practice questions before I even got to the test. So I did every question bank there was, did some of them multiple times. And so, obviously put
but
the
Mike,
time
let me intervene. So yes, 5,000 some questions, studying all the time. And again, and I said this in the last episode, but this is what somebody who is an inconsistent test taker, a poor test taker, does. They overcompensate, they overtrain, they overstudy, they do more questions than the person sitting next to them. That's just how you compensate, unless we can intervene through methodology. And at this point, what year is this?
This is 2012 at this point. So
yes, so you're doing this. The build up through 2012, and this is also when I left Marshall and I created what would become StatMed Learning. during the same exact year. So this big year for you, I was sort of leaving and trying to figure out the next step for me. So you're doing all this, you're doing all this prep, and then, you take the test, right?
Yeah. So as most people, first couple of weeks in July, you take it, you're 6 weeks out. And so, but at that point you go off on rotations and auditions, and you're going to, all these different programs, and you're trying to, look good, and you're trying to work hard, and you're trying to get into one of these residency spots. And so you're doing well. They like you. They think you're a good fit, but then they pull your scores and they see your step one and they see you failed step two. And so then you're back to honestly the embarrassment of not doing well in testing, because that's what everybody looks at. And a lot of places,
this is a major crisis, right? This is like there are people like lining you up and earmarking you, like, we like this guy, we want this guy on our team. And then the shoe drops and you fail this test, right? This isn't just like they wanted you to get above average and you scored below average. That's a different scenario, right?
This is a lot of places they use, because they have 300 or 400 applicants for 4 spots. Right. That was 10 years ago. Then their first line of defense is board scores. And so if you don't pass the boards, you automatically are off their list. And so going there and kind of can get you closer, but a lot of places were like, we're sorry, you didn't pass boards. That's the first step to even getting an interview. And
all right. So number one, so that is, right there, bang, that's a massive blow. And then you've got the school and what the school is going to do to somebody who's now failed their boards, correct?
Yeah. So then they're reaching out and they're doing the best they can, but they think that the answer is to study more and to do more questions and to practice harder, and to, you go back to the story of just work harder is really the advice to be able to get through it. And again,
Mike, is there also an accusation? Is there also an accusation that maybe you didn't work hard enough the first time?
Yeah, that's because they see that all the time, that people didn't put the effort in, they didn't put the time in, they didn't do what they were supposed to. And so that's the people they see. And so they think that if you put the time in, you do what you're supposed to do, you do practice questions, you prep, then you're going to pass.
Because I think there's a presumption that all med students are built the same, wired the same cognitive wiring, and that it's just the simpler solution. Everything's easier if that's the case, right? But we have to embrace that not everybody has the same strengths and weaknesses, that not all people read and process test questions the same, not all people learn and encode information the same, but it is the easier answer. Oh, you failed. And it's an easy recommendation. Like, go do 1,000 more questions, go do 5,000 more questions, use this bank instead of that bank. Those are easier recommendations than, oh, we got to retrain this brain. We got to intervene with an appropriate intervention. That's tough. That's a harder solution. And I don't think that's just our cultural setup. It's just like, well, go do this. So so after the first failure, step 2, did you have to go back to the promotions committee, or was that just get ready to take it again?
No, that was just you have a couple months to retake it, start over, keep going, because you already have all the information, you already have all this stuff prepped out, you already have been studying this for 5 months at this point. Every day, this is what you're doing. This is your life, was studying for this test because you're trying to do well. And so now I'm traveling. Every 2 weeks, you're moving to the next program. You're still trying to study and look good to these places, because in a year, you're hopefully graduated from med school and you want a residency spot and you want one of these spots that you're going to. And so you're trying to, again, balance the studying for boards, because you still have to pass it, and none of this happens without passing it.
Right. So you pretty much turned around and took this test pretty quickly after that, right?
Yeah. So, you have match day, you have a deadline, and they have to have all their stuff back by match day, or you miss the whole cycle. And so I think I took 2.5, maybe 3 months, had it rescheduled, because you're off the normal cycling. So scheduling is a little more difficult. You're off traveling. So where you're going to take it is a little more difficult. And so getting everything lined up. So 2-3 months turnaround, but you've already done all the work. So you think, oh, it's a bad test day. And so you can just turn around, I'll get through it, pass it quick. And then, you'll be able to move forward, continue the interview process, get the residency by match day.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a logical. I don't think we talked between these two tests. So you did what I think is a fairly logical thing. How many more questions? So you think you did a lot more practice questions again?
Yeah, I probably did a whole another question bank 1 or 2 times. I was probably at another 2,000 questions by the next 3 months. But it was really just going through reviewing and trying to find the stuff that you were weak in, hitting it hard, and then finding your weaknesses and moving through it.
Yeah, and so you did that, and then you took it again, and I'm assuming what I don't want to assume what happened then when you took level 2 the second time.
Yeah, so now we're in November of 4th year, 6 months from graduation, and I failed again 2 months from match day. So I failed step 2 twice now, and I'm really in trouble.
This looks like maybe game over, right?
Yeah, back to margin of error. If anybody else had, sailed through first and second year, sailed through step 1, you fail boards twice and it's not as big of a deal, but you already have history. You're already on the list. You're already going through the promotions committee. And so then everything starts over. And so then you have to be
so now is the promotions committee now back on your case?
Yeah, so now you have to get approved to be able to take it for the 3rd time.
Could they, now remind me, could the promotions committee decide, sorry, you don't even get a chance? Or is it like you're going to definitely get a chance to take it the 3rd time?
No, same. They can decide, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have an explanation, then they very easily can say, you've taken it twice, that was your shot. We're not going to let you take it again, and you're out again.
Wow. Terrifying. So what did they say to you?
So they, you get dressed up, you go to the meeting again, you try and talk to these people about it. And so they luckily said, 1 more shot. You get the 3rd chance, you take it, this is it. No, there's no more, there's no 4th time, you don't take it again. There's a 3rd, and again, that's your line in the sand. You pass it or fail it, you're in med school or not. And so
this is the ultimate test for you after all the stuff you've been through. It's like, this is truly, it's like I don't know, like every movie's like, this is the biggest battle. This is the biggest challenge whoever's like, this is Iron Man's biggest challenge. This is Jason Bourne's biggest challenge. But this really is like, this was Mike's biggest challenge, right?
Yeah, it's the line in the sand. You have 8 hours. Whatever number that computer spits out is whether your future is done and you're not a doctor, or you can continue on and graduate. Like, that's the line. That is the line you have to cross to be able to graduate.
So what did you do?
I called you, panicked. we have these intertwining episodes in the 5 years of med school, and I called you, panicked, because I thought it was still a study thing. I was studying what we did, and it wasn't working. It wasn't coming through on the test.
I had just left my spot at Marshall. I just packed up and I said, I'm going on my own. I'm going to figure this thing out. Didn't really have a business plan. Hadn't really figured out what it all looked like. But I knew at that point, I had decided at that point that the models were different and the demographics were different. And I wasn't really looking to work with the same demographic I was working with at Marshall. I was like, I think that I can help anybody who identifies as being, I don't know how to study in med school. And that was going to be the StatMed class. And then I was building this thing called the StatMed Boards Workshop, which is I'm smart. I know my stuff. I just can't show it on test day. That's the StatMed Boards Workshop. Take a bad test taker and turn them into a good test taker on medical board exams. This goes step 1, level 1, all the way through step 2, level 2, step 2, level 3, shelf exams, specialty boards, subspecialty boards, anything under the umbrella of medicine, from anesthesia to emergency medicine to cardio to just different surgeries, whatever. But I was just building it. I was just now trying to figure out what's the through line, what's the mechanism, what's the system. And I think, we talked about it. You were panicked. I was sitting in this little office I'd set up in the back of my house. And I was like, I wish he was calling me 6 months later when I had this thing built. But I think what we did was, I think it was like, I was like, all right, Mike, I hear you. And I know your brain as well as I know anybody's. And I know your personality, I know your temperament and all that stuff. And I was like, I think, and all the study stuff, I was like, sounds fine, sounds right. I'm not seeing like a lot of times you can see it's like the matrix. It's like, oh, there's a breakdown here, or this is fuzzy. Maybe there's a problem here, maybe not. It also, I think we had your study stuff up and running pretty well, but we didn't have this other side, this test taking performance showing consistently what you know on medical board exams over this 8-hour test. Because I'll say, like, I say this elsewhere, I say it all the time, like, test taking is a weak link system. Some things are strong link systems, some things are weak link systems. This isn't about you at your best when you crush a question. I don't care about that. What I care about is you at your worst, when you are abusing the question, when you're distorting the specific question being asked, when you're rounding down key clues, when you're doing single points of contact, when you're using a binary test taking mentality, when you're ruling in instead of ruling out. And you are truly the poster child. So I think what we said, I was like, look, Mike, why don't we just have you be the guinea pig as I develop this? That's what we did, right?
Yeah.
I was like,
I was like, I'm the third person to take the class. Like, you tried it once, and then I think I was the second or third person to go through it, and you were still putting stuff together, and you had notebooks you were mailing out, and so
it was crazy.
Very early.
Yeah, it was very early. And I was like, well, we're just going to spin this thing out. And like I said, I believed in you. I knew you. And I was upset for you. I was like, oh my gosh, no, not at this point. And, and you were just crestfallen and scared and traumatized. And, we get into it and I'm looking at your test taking. So this means, like, using like Google Hangouts or whatever weird portal we were using at that time. And you were, that means you're reading questions out loud and then articulating all your thoughts as you go. And it's a train wreck. It's a mess. So one of my skills, I think my special skill, and I think this is similar for you as an emergency medicine doc, is I'm really good at pattern recognition. And, my background with, like, the way the ADHD brain works, the way reading and learning works, where gifted learning works and, like, learning disabilities work. Most of my docs, they might have a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but it's just patterns. It's like, oh, look, like this is a bad pattern. He's exhibiting this bad pattern, these same bad patterns repeated over and over. Now, and maybe there's like 12 to 15 bad test taking patterns. Somebody might only be doing 2 or 3 of them, and it's enough to really wreck their test taking. But you were like checking so many of the boxes. It was a great early, like, avatar to build through. Because, like, you could just say, look, just plug Mike into this. Oh, he does that. Oh, he does this. And again, it's not, there's just invisible behaviors to you. So we get in there and we start installing the system. Now, the system's evolved a lot since then and blah, blah, blah. But we're installing this very rigid process for reading the questions. It's kind of like an elaborate apparatus, right? You go from prompt to passage to, triangulate, what we now call status check, and taking each option one by one, not weighing them together, giving them one of these codes. It's like sort of weighing it in a vacuum. How accurate, how honest are those? And then if you go to a tie break, how do you break that tie? This is all stuff that you can see some videos on our website about this. This is our StatMed Boards workshop. But on the one hand, we have to install the system. I don't think it's like rocket science to install the system. It's a process, and we're good at it. It probably wasn't as fast, but you had about 2 months, I think, right, when you got a hold of me to turn this ship around. And so we start installing the system, like hammering it into place. So we have to teach you to play the game the way we want you to play it. And then ultimately, and you guys are smart people, Mike, you're a smart person. My med students, physicians are smart. They have to be their own coach. Like, every time you do questions, you have to use the system. And this is what we're getting up, and I'm figuring this out. Like, oh, this is really important. This is less important, all that. And really getting it up and flying from untimed to like tutor mode to time mode to what's our success rate with tie breaks and all this stuff, right? So we get this thing up and going. And I think we did it for free, right? Wasn't it like, Mike, you're going to do this. I'm not going to charge you because I'm still making it up. And then you're just going to help me in the future. And then you've been indebted to me ever since. You've been indebted to me ever since. And that's really why you're doing this podcast. Like, I owe him forever. I'm just kidding.
Big time.
You did the work. I didn't. And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work because bad test taking is bad behavior. That's like one of my mantras. Do you think that's true? Like, it's just
Absolutely.
it's just like your default wiring, how you operate in these questions, right?
And nobody knows because you've been taking tests since I was 4 years old, and you've been taking them the same way. And you go back and you think when you're in third grade, you miss questions because you went too fast or you jumped too fast. And, your mom was like, I studied all this stuff with you and you still got this question wrong. Like, what's going on? You know this stuff. And then you go to the test and you didn't get it right. And so that just carries on until you get to boards. And so it's the same deal, just on a bigger scale. And
on a bigger scale, but
the misses
what I tell
are more
people,
amplified.
Well, they're more amplified, but it's like, why didn't it get caught before? And I say it didn't get caught before because it wasn't a problem. It's not a problem until it's a problem. And so you're able to, maybe you're missing some of these nuancy questions due to impulsivity or you're sort of coloring outside the lines or what have you. But you're able to then cover it up with your intellect and your ability to explain to a teacher and to get points elsewhere. But when you get to the construct of these medical board exams, they're very unforgiving. They're all of equal cumbersome build. And if you have weaker executive functioning, weaker working memory, which I think applies to you, it just all gets exposed and it all gets amplified. Part of having a good test taking solution at this level is finding out where the weaknesses are and then having a system that limits the burden on those weaknesses. That's bad decisions, bad behavior, working memory weaknesses, executive functioning weaknesses. You really want to build that system out to sort of buffer that. What, Mike? So we did this. We're working for like 2 weeks. What can you remember? Maybe one or two of, I'm putting you on the spot, of the kinds of mistakes you might make, either the name of the mistake or a contextualized example of the kind of mistake you might make on a question because I think what happens, let me just say this first. The idea is like in your training, because it doesn't matter on test day, you don't know. You have to execute like you train on test day. You miss a question, you read the answer explanation, you then sort it into one of two categories. Was it a knowledge miss or a test taking miss? A knowledge miss is like, I just didn't know that. Fine. Fair miss. You're going to miss it. I don't care about those. The true legit knowledge misses you were making were not why you were scoring the scores you were scoring below 400. The reason you were scoring below 400 is because of the other side, the test taking misses. This is when you read the answer explanation and you realize, hey, I should have gotten that right. And then just the staggering number of these things. So you have to, in training, identify the test taking misses. Then you have to always do like a postmortem autopsy where you track out what did you do right and what did you do specifically wrong. And that's where like the board's workshop is very mechanized and streamlined for all this. But I mean, anybody can do that to a degree. Do you remember like an example of one or two of the kind of misses you were particularly susceptible to?
There are a bunch, but I would twist the vignette into fitting an answer that was wrong. I would do that a lot.
Square pegs will fit in round holes if you hit them hard enough, right? So so this is where it's funny because like twisting is like a weird way to abuse your knowledge, right? Because you're not like twisting it from nothing. You're seeing an answer option, then you're reading the clues in the vignette, and you are manipulating them based on your knowledge, right? To make them fit, to shape the square peg into a round peg so it'll fit through the round hole. So it's not even hitting it hard. You're distorting the object to fit. So you're like a really bad twister, right?
Yeah, and then also I would be answering the wrong questions because my working memory was so bad. I would forget what question I was answering by the time I was trying to work through all the choices. And so I would lose details in the question.
You mean like the specific question being asked, like the last sentence, what we call the prompt, right? So if it's asking for best initial treatment, you lose sight of initial treatment. You're thinking best overall broad spectrum treatment. Most appropriate next step in management. You're choosing something farther up the staircase, not immediately next. And then you miss it. And I'd say, well, would you do that next? You're like, no, you wouldn't do it next. You do it later. And that's the answer you chose. And you would know, right? So, and your brain isn't going to just leave a giant hole in like what is the question being asked? Your brain is going to lose the question and then auto-correct and fill in the void. And then that's, I think, what you end up plugging in because it's all swirling around. It's a mess. It's chaos. And you're saying, yeah, this is something you could do for this patient in this situation with compartment syndrome, but it's not what you would do next. And you know that as an emergency medicine physician. You're like, no, it wouldn't be. Or you would pick something that's not the most appropriate. Like I would see you do this all the time. Like you'll pick an answer and you'll explain to me why it's right. And it sounds really good and medical and knowledgeable. And I'm like, would it be the most appropriate next step in management? Like just breaking down the simplest yet complex question that you might see in a medical board exam, right? Question. And you'd be like, well, you could do it. I'm on the right track, right?
Right.
Yeah, you could do that. But I'm like, but is it most appropriate? And this isn't even like most appropriate compared to other options. You're just like, no, it wouldn't be like the textbook thing. Is that, I mean, that's fair, right?
Yeah. And after you do so many questions, you see that all the answers are right for a different question. They're right if the question vignette is changed just a little bit. And that's the point of the test, is to see where the details are. And so if you are missing it from the beginning and you're going down looking for the right answer to the wrong question, you're in trouble. It's impossible.
It is the equivalent of you trying to tell me what 10 plus 10 is. But if I say, hey, what's 10 plus 10? You tell me it's 20. I'm like, no, Mike, it's 22. You're like, what? And I'm like, 10 plus 10 plus 2. You're like, I didn't have the plus 2. You have the wrong coordinates. Well, it's Raiders of the Lost Ark. It's like, so Raiders of the Lost Ark, the bad guy Nazi, he like Indiana Jones needs the headpiece to the staff of Ra, and Marion has it. And there's writing on both sides. Spoiler for a movie that came out in 1982. And so the bad guy grabs it when it's in the fire, and he screams like hilariously in agony when it burns into his hand, but it only burns one side. So the bad guys are digging based on the coordinates of only the front side of the headpiece of the staff of Ra. The good guys have the actual medallion, and they can see on both sides they have the right coordinates. So what you're describing and what you would often engage in is you would take the wrong coordinates, either not even from the clues, the medical clues in the vignette, but simply the sentence, the question being asked. I think it's pretty popular advice. Read the last sentence first. I think it's well known at this point, much better than it was 10, 15 years ago. But I still see so many of my bad test takers, they read that last sentence, but they don't profit from it. 30 seconds later, 65, 70 seconds later, when they're choosing their answer, they've become unmoored from it and they're answering a different question. And that's what you're describing, right?
Right.
I mean, I don't know if people can appreciate how bad this is, right? Because I guess it's just a matter of how prevalent and consistent it is, right? If you do it once every block, every 2 blocks, it's not a big deal. But you were at risk of doing it at such a high rate. Almost any question you were at risk, and you didn't know when you were doing it, right?
Once we went back through and analyzed, when we started, I was probably at 60 to 80% of my misses were test taking misses. You could figure out a way that it was a test taking miss.
So people might, 6 out of 10, call it 70% of your misses. You missed 10 questions, only 3 of them were fair misses. And if that's true, that means your knowledge was so far above 400, the bare passing. 500 was the average back then. I don't know if it still is. So ideally, if you clean up your test taking, you should be scoring much higher. So, we really hammered away at this stuff. And I think you really understood all the steps, because I even use like specific vocabulary, like the last sentence I call the prompt. We steps called triangulation. The tie breaks have very specific names, like reverse the flow, like for and against. We talk about like different misphenomenons. We give them names. I think it's really important you give them names and rationales to go with them, because that's giving the test taker like you ownership. And it gives us a common vocabulary to talk about as we're troubleshooting. So, I remember you really struggling. Like, you really brought the system on board, but we weren't seeing the results. We weren't seeing the score. Because what happens, I think, is if test taking is a true problem, like it was for you, the system has to be all the way dialed in. Like, you can't just do like the system's 60 of the way there, so I'll see a 60% increase. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. It's like it's got to be all the way dialed in, like 95% fidelity. And if it's not, then you see 0% increase. So I was driving to Baltimore to teach a class like January, like New Year's, it was probably like New Year's Day. I'm driving up there. And I remember stopping in Morgantown, which is like 3 hours from my house, like halfway between here and Baltimore. I remember driving, talking to you about, we're like going over, like just trying to get unstuck from it. It's like, I think we were just dissecting one question. But you were trying to figure out the difference between where the inference ended and where the twisting began, and really weighing the options neutrally. But you just weren't seeing the scores flip in. And this is right around that time. And I think what had happened for you was, you get to a point of frustration. Like you were recognizing it in what's called self-reflection. So you were able to see the mistakes consistently after the fact. You would self-reflect and say, I'm still making that same mistake. I'm twisting here. I'm twisting there. I'm narrowing down to 2 and picking the one I know least about. I'm moving away from the specific prompt, the question being asked. And so that's called self-reflection. You have to get really good at self-reflection, seeing the problems after the fact. And that grows what's called self-monitoring, being able to regulate yourself in the run of play. Some people, I think, are going to just really, the self-reflection just leads to self-monitoring. But for you, you're one of the ones where it's like you have a breaking point. And like ideally, the self-monitoring like the kicks in before you're ready to throw your computer through the wall. But I think yours was well past that. Like is this right? Like you were like really frustrated. Like, why is it not? Like you could see it. You could see the mistake types after the fact. But it just took that 10 clicks past frustration, which is pretty far, to then really start to see the scores flip around. Does that sound right?
Well, and we had to slow it down, and I was writing long form out explanations on the whole question, and so we slowed it down. You'd give me a question that I missed, and I would write it out long form, paragraph form into explanations and send it to you, and then we would go through it, and then and really being tight with the analysis was what was important as well. Because if
that's what we call, Mike, that's what we call those DAWs, deep analysis write-ups. And that's been really productive for people. So there's a form of that sort of evolved out of there. Because when we make people write them out, nobody wants to do it. There's nowhere to hide. And then you could more easily see where somebody is going off track. And I think we had you write those up. So the better you got at the write-up, the better your the self-reflecting got. And the better the self-reflecting got, the better your self-monitoring became. But eventually it clicked in, right? But yeah, we would go through these write-ups, correct?
Right. And so it was just, you do 10 questions at a time, you'd stop, you'd go through and analyze them, figure out what you did, figure out which ones were test taking, which ones were knowledge. And then the test taking ones, you really went back through, and then we'd figure out which mistake you were making, so that when you saw a question of the same pattern 200 questions later, you don't make that same mistake coming through.
Well, and it's like you could also then feel yourself starting to make the mistake, and then you could switch. It's like you steering your car off the road, then you're building the rumble strips to bring you back on. That's the self-monitoring. So you would be able to catch yourself and prevent the catastrophe from happening, right?
And there was one question that really stuck out in this time that we did a write-up on. And then 2 days later, 200 questions later, it was a different question, same pattern, same vignette, but different answers. And I got it right, and I sent it to you. I was like, that was it. That was the same question. 2 days ago, I was missing it. And then today, like I could see it coming. You could see the pattern of the question going through. And so you don't miss it then.
Yeah, because it all came from the training. And again, I think we know this, like this is how it works in sports. You practice patterns of play over and over and over again. You analyze, you reflect, and eventually you're able to do it in the run of play. And that's exactly what we had to do with you. So you turn around on this thing. You didn't do anything else. You didn't study anything else. you only did questions using the StatMed process in that 2-month window, right? Into December, into January. Is that accurate?
Right. Yeah, we just started, you do one question at a time, analyze it, one question at a time, analyze it, then you'd go to 10 questions at a time, analyze those 10.
Adding time, and then and every time we added a variable for you, your scores would drop down.
Back off,
and then you have to climb
10,
back up.
20% anytime we change something. And so
variable.
then you have
going from like untimed to time, going from 20 questions 20 questions at a run, 25 up to 50 questions at a run, like the COMLEX is, 72 seconds per question, 60 minutes for 50 questions. Then even going from the paper-based trainers that we used to the computer simulation trainer, like we're using the dry erase marker and the stupid grid sheet they give you. Every time we added a variable, your scores would drop 20%, right?
Right, and we had to figure out how to make it work because the training sheets were different than what you had on the day of the test. And so then we had to adapt the coding and changing and analysis to do it real time during the day of the test on the, you get one marker and one flimsy sheet of paper that has a grid on it. And so you had to figure out how to do that so that the day of you had it set. And so we spent a lot of work.
Right now, like that's built into the board's workshop. Like we call it these different simulation trainers. So now, weeks before the test, depending on people's window of time, people are training with a sheet that emulates what they give you with the marker they give you. And that's like if you're going to play the Super Bowl, you play all season on grass, and the Super Bowl is going to be on turf. Those last 2 weeks are only training on turf. Because it's like that's how you train for a competitive event. You understand the arena and you train for it. But again, a lot of this stuff came from me and you just, raging against the stupid logistics and then saying, all right, it is what it is. Let's train for it. So you did all that. You only did the StatMed stuff. You failed with like a 385, 400's passing, 500's national average. What score did you get?
So after 2 months of the program and working through everything, on step 2, I passed with a 580, which was in the 80th percentile range.
So you went from what percentile to what percentile?
Probably the first or second to the, between 80 and 85th percentile in 2 months.
I mean, this should be like an infomercial. Maybe it sounds like one. I don't know. It's amazing, right? Like that's crazy.
And that's the unfortunate part was that it took 2 years of barely passing boards or barely passing tests to figure out that that's what the problem was and to go through it and to be able to figure out what the problem was and to be able to fix it.
Well, and that falls on me a little bit because that's just where I was on my evolutionary curve of building the board's workshop. I didn't know. And it really came together with me and you working together. Like if I didn't have you as this, who knows how many hours we spent on that, I needed the feedback. I needed somebody who was living it organically, and I needed to see what happens when we took it all the way through to its logical conclusion. And hitting a 580, that's like what kind of residencies, if that's what somebody gets, like what kind of realm are we talking about? We're talking high-end residency candidates.
Yeah, that could have gotten you most things. Like that was where people were getting what residency they wanted.
Right. Back at that time. So anyway, so that is sort of the resolution of your second major crisis point. Very happy ending. And I'm glad that I could be of help for that. But then you did have one last crisis point, the third of 3 crisis points in your career to get to where you are now in Florida as working as an emergency medicine doctor. And we're not going to spend as much time on this, but what can you tell me about this?
Yeah, so it's all timing. So by the time you pass boards, you miss match day and you don't get the residency you want. No place was really even looking at you because you haven't passed boards by the time they pick their group of people they want every year. And so at that time, I passed just in time. I graduated 2 weeks late because they pulled me off rotations to study for the boards the third time. And so luckily, I could start residency on time, but I ended up scrambling into a family medicine residency that, so I could go forward, because there wasn't really any other options to, at that point, all the ER residencies were filled. Everybody had their spots, and, a lot of the family medicine residencies in the country were filled, because, everything was filling pretty significantly quickly then. It's even worse now, really. And so, that I ended up in a family medicine residency, which was obviously never the plan. That's not why I went to med school. And, we talked about this.
I know that. I know that because I came through town where you were in residency. I was just driving from wherever in the Carolinas or whatever. And I came through town, and, we lined up and we went and had lunch. And I remember the restaurant. I remember where we were sitting. I remember which direction we're facing in. We're catching up. And you say to me, if I knew I was going to have to do this, to do family medicine, hey, nothing against family medicine. You need family medicine doctors. It's just not what you got in the game for. It's not why you sacrificed and struggled, all through all this to do. You were like, if I knew I was going to have to do this to be a family medicine doctor, I never would have done it. It was such a kick in my stomach. I was just like, oh man, Mike, I felt so bad for you, because I was like, this guy, this is not what he wanted. Like, I knew what you'd sacrificed. I knew the long-term suffering that you'd gone through. I knew the work you had done to overcome these challenges. And I was like, oh man. So I remember driving home. I was hours. I think I just drove for like an hour in dead silence, which I never do. Just like, I don't know, just like thinking about your plight. It's awful. It's great lunch, Mike. Great lunch. But it left a mark. And, I don't know. I was upset for you. And I felt like I was a part of your career. I mean, again, you're the one that did all the work, and you helped me in a lot of ways as much as I helped you. But to think about, because I knew what you wanted to do, and I'm part of like an emergency medicine, review program. I know all these guys, and I know how much they love their job. And again, it's not for everybody. But I think that's what you wanted, what you were trained for. So that's kind of where you were. And then how did you, just real quick, like, how did you get out of that? Because you are an emergency medicine doctor. Like, I knew in the old days, there was like a weird relationship with family medicine and emergency medicine. That was like before they had enough emergency medicine doctors, because it was relatively new. And like that portal had closed, right?
Yeah. And so, especially when I was going through, and, this is 2012, 2013, ER got really competitive and has continued over the past 8 to 10 years of getting more and more competitive.
Right.
So, I was doing family med. It was fine, but personality wise, that wasn't my deal.
No, that's not you.
And so I had to figure out a way. And so there were options. You could go straight out of family med and work in a small ER somewhere out in the middle of nowhere and kind of do it that way. But I knew I needed more ER experience than what I got doing family med clinic and rounding in the hospital and that, And so I found a ER fellowship that was a year that I could go do, and it was basically a mini residency that I went and picked up my family again. We moved and went and did another year just of ER, just what I wanted to be doing. And, that prepared me great for coming out. And so there are other ways to get around and to get to where you want to be.
And I think that's just an important message, right? Because like you can't sit down. Like if you sat there when you and I are sitting there in that restaurant, like we couldn't see the way out. You couldn't see the way out. I couldn't see the way out. All you can do is like put your foot forward and finish up, do what you can do, and then pivot and look for other options. I think that's part of the message I took from it. And I didn't know how my business was going to evolve or how it was going to shape. And I just try to connect with my people and help people in how I can, when I can. And you just hope that opens doors for you. And I think both of us have ended up on the other side of things with that, right?
Yeah, and that's what you have to realize is there's stepping stones at each place. And so you have to get through whatever you're doing at that point. You have to put the time in to study for step one so that you can move on to the next thing. And you have to get things through, and you have to do everything that you need to do to be able to graduate. And then you need to be able to get into a residency and get through a residency. And so each of those things are different stepping stones, but each time you get through the next thing, more and more options open up, and then you can kind of find where your place is and where you need to be and what you want to do and what makes you happy.
But and even if and again, I think the key was like, even if you can't see that end, because I think a lot of us, like, sort of, personality types, it's like, I want to be able to see what that plan is. Sometimes you can't see it. Like, you couldn't see it the day I was talking to you.
I definitely couldn't see it when I didn't get an ER residency and I was calling places all over the country trying to find a family medicine. You definitely don't see the future, and you don't see the 10 years from now where it's going to go, and that your life can be good and it's going to be good and everything's going to be great. But you can't see it when you're in the middle of it, and because all you can see is tomorrow, what's going to have to happen and what you're doing tomorrow and the next day. And so, and you kind of start getting out of it, and then something else might pull you back in, and you're in the forest again and it's dark again, and then you can push back through it. But as long as you're moving forward, it'll eventually kind of move through.
Yeah, well, or certainly in different places, there are these different inflection points, but but I think that you're, again, like, the way you found your way through this and where you've ended up and what you're doing is really wonderful stuff, and it's inspiring. And I certainly, remember these crisis points that you went through. And then again, as we, like you and I were talking about before we started recording, like, you start looking back at it and it's like, I don't know, it's like looking at, like, oh, we could have gotten run over here, could have gotten run over there, dodged that bullet, didn't know I was dodging, like, where I knew it was, but you're just in the fight trying to keep your head above water, however you want to mix the metaphor. It's pretty gratifying to see the other side. And I certainly appreciate you for getting to where you got and sharing all of this. So, all that said, thanks for listening to this first episode, or these first 2 episodes of our Crisis Point podcast series. Thanks to Mike, for sharing this awesome story. If you relate to Mike's experience, feel free to reach out so I can hear your story, answer any questions you might have, and see if we can help you on your path to success in medicine. Thanks for listening.
If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe, and check out our website for other interviews and to get more useful tips and strategies for learning and test taking in medical school, on boards, and in related medical fields. You can find us at STATMedLearning.com. Thanks for listening.